You're listening to Kill Cliff's Hazard Ground podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get started with this week's episode, and our guest is somebody who is tackling an issue that is immensely important to the United States military. We'll get to that coming up in just a moment. But first, some of our normal announcements and reminders. Please follow us on all the social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground Podcast. Keep growing this community, guys. It's so great to interact with everybody. I love hearing from you guys on social media. I love the comments, the feedback from everybody. Please feel free to reach out on all the social media sites. Shoot us a DM, whatever it is. Email us at producer@hazardground.com. We'd love to hear some feedback from you guys, and we'll continue to go back and forth. You guys are what makes this show so great, and so much fun to do each week, and telling all these amazing stories. So we appreciate hearing from you. Don't forget about our promotion with Amazon. Go to our website, hazardground.com, and click on the Amazon button at the bottom of the homepage, or under the sponsors tab. It'll redirect you to Amazon. You can do all of your normal Amazon shopping, whatever you want to buy. I know we got that time of year where gifts are coming. Mother's Day right around the corner as we sit here to record this. So if you're going to do any shopping, go to hazardground.com first. We'll get a percentage of what you guys spend, and then we donate a percentage of that back to some of the great charities and organizations you've heard featured here on the Hazard Ground. Also works really easy on your smartphone, redirects you right to the app. So all of your credit card information, everything is saved. It's convenient. It's user-friendly. Go to hazardground.com first. Please continue to leave us some reviews where you get your Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a positive review. Give us as many stars as they allow. Tell us why you love the show. Doesn't have to be a lengthy review, just something that notes that you've listened to the show and certainly like it. We appreciate all the feedback as well. Hopefully we can crack that top 100 Apple Podcasts here really, really soon. And then finally, more of your homework. Spread the word about the Hazard Ground. Let people know that this show exists. And if you have any recommendations for guests, we'd love to hear from those too as well. We certainly look into everybody that is sent our way. And so don't hesitate to reach out to us on our website and let us know if you have a guest suggestion. All right. This week, our guest is a former member of the U.S. Army, and she got out after 8 years as a specialist and deployed in support of Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield. She is now the Chief Operations Officer of an organization called the Pink Berets, and they specialize in bringing counseling, treatment, and resources to female veterans suffering from PTSD and military sexual trauma as well. She is one of the grassroots individuals that opened up the investigation into the death of Specialist Vanessa Guillen at Fort Hood, and we welcome her to the show. It's Lucy Del Gaudio here on the Hazard Ground. Lucy, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay. There is so much to unravel and unwrap with the Specialist Guillen thing. It is one of those stories that if you were in the Army or in the military when it happened, you'll never forget it because it left such an indelible mark on our service and the Department of Defense and all of the branches of the military because it was failure at so many levels, right? And it's something that we cannot allow to ever happen again. And unfortunately, in certain cases, in certain ways, it's still happening, and it's something that needs to be addressed. But I appreciate you off the bat. I say thank you for being one of the people who helped bring this story and this fight to the forefront because it is so important. We've heard all the things, and as a leader in the organization, we talk about degrading the force and all that other stuff. It's just wrong. You don't have to get complicated with fancy terms, and I get so nauseated hearing the idea of zero tolerance because it's complete BS. Because if we had zero tolerance, we wouldn't be here, right? We have plenty of tolerance for it. And unfortunately, we've had too much tolerance for it. And I get nauseated at the fact every time I hear, well, we have zero tolerance for sexual assault and sexual harassment in the military. No, you actually have tolerance. We've had tolerance for way too long, and I'm kind of sick of it. So thank you. I say thank you for continuing to bring light to this issue. That aside, okay, I'd like to hear your story and how you got here. As we get some chuckles here from our staff. No,
sure. So do you want me to start from the beginning of like what made me make the decision to join the military and all that good stuff? But we could start there. No. Happy to start there.
No. I want to hear your story first because you are what we're here to talk about. What I mean, I'm passionate about this, right? Like I am beyond, I take it as a personal affront, as somebody who's been in this organization for over 20 years and somebody who embraces the art of leadership and embraces the art of being a leader and wants to pass on that knowledge to other people. This is purely a leadership issue. That's all it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's just parents it's just parents teaching kids right from wrong. And it's leaders teaching subordinates right from wrong and putting an emphasis on it to the point where you're actually affecting things in a positive manner. It's not difficult. We have just chosen, whether cognizantly or subconsciously, to not make it a priority for way too long. And it's how we got here. And I don't understand. And I can't wrap my head around, like, it's crazy to me that there are people in our organization still to this day who haven't picked up on this concept that, dude, don't do this. Like, stop, like, grow up.
Yeah. And what really plagues the whole issue is that it's not a discriminatory issue, because men are reporting as much as women are. Men being assaulted by women are being assaulted by women, men being assaulted by men. It's just an issue. It's a toxic leadership issue that hasn't been addressed. And we're trying to make strides, and we've gotten very far, but we still now, they put the pen to paper, but now it's time to execute. And it's still going on, regardless of, that they signed that executive order in January. It's still fucking going on. And we have to really still beat that drum and beat it, because otherwise they're going to just continue to have these toxic traits.
Right.
And
I was just going to say, Ed, I don't think this isn't a point of eradication, right? Like, that's not going to happen, because it doesn't happen in society. We're not going to eradicate sexual assault out of society. It's just a question of responsibility and accountability at every single level. That is all we're asking for. Look at
the word that you just used, accountability. So let's use in Vanessa Guillen's case. Okay, she went missing. Okay, and then nobody, everybody left post. Nobody gave a crap that she went missing. Everybody left post. They went on with their day. If that were to be a weapon, Fort Hood would have been closed down.
Locked down, right. If it was a pistol,
locked up,
yep.
It would have pistol.
Nobody would have went home.
So
double arm interval length.
Because I've been in that. Exactly. I've been in that situation where something's missing. Everybody, nope, hang tight. We're going to find that piece of equipment, and then you could go along your. So she went missing. People knew she was missing, and everybody went on their way. And that, to me, was one of the points where I was like, what the fuck? Like, what's going on here? There's something going on that's just more, on top of this. There was more layers to this that we're not, reaching.
And a little. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And for me, when it first hit the news that she went missing, I totally stayed away from it, because it was triggering me, because I was assaulted in 92, and I just didn't want to take that dive, because, again, triggering me, and I just wanted to stay away. It was a friend that served with me in Germany, and me and him, we do like every so often we do touch bases to see how each other is doing. And he's like, what are you going to do about this? And I'm like, what do you mean? What am I going to do about this? And he goes, you're an advocate. What are you going to try to do? And I go, right now, I don't know what I could do. I'm really triggered, and it's really bothering me. And he goes, Lucy, every time I look at her picture, it reminds me of you. And that was like, ugh. And that really was like, I have to start executing something. So that was the first time that I really took a deep dive and started doing all the research and looking at all the articles that it came out. The majority of the articles that I found were with Latino news channels. A lot of the regular media was not picking it up. Once they found her body, that's when you started seeing this cycle. And that's when my advocacy changed from the advocacy that I was doing just in New Jersey. And then it opened this gamut, and I joined this grassroots effort, and we went to work, and we started activating this, campaign to have the investigation of Fort Hood. And then it just took this life. And it really, the last 2 years have been incredibly interesting for me, because I have, met and have done so much work in this effort. I'm not alone. There's many of us that have gotten our hands super fucking dirty, because it's dirty work that we had to do, because it's not just the work of our own stories and our own personal trauma, but trying to find people who are willing to share their stories just the way we are. Because if we don't share our stories, nobody is going to execute the way we had to execute.
Right.
Because our stories made a difference in this, because we lived it. But especially the stories of the women that looked and had the similarities to Vanessa. Vanessa's from a first generation Mexican family. And a lot of Latinas, a lot of women of color, we joined the military because, we don't have a method of, going to college. And, we are that first generation. We're trying to establish equity. We're trying to build something for our own. So we step into these shoes, but we don't realize that, I'll never forget my first 24 hours in boot camp, racial slurs, sexual innuendos. And I was like, damn, my brother was my damn recruiter. My brother was the one that took me through the doors and recruited me to join the military. And these are things that, not that he didn't do his job as his recruiter, but he never experienced, because again, his army was really different than my army.
Yeah.
And he joined the military in 1973. So you could just imagine, it was a really different dynamic. By the time he was, a recruiter, he was well ranked, and he was just recruiting so he could buy his time, so he could, so he could retire. So for him, it was just getting his sister, because my father passed away. My mother couldn't afford 2 daughters in the military. So in college, so I went to the military to try to find, money to go to school. So that's why I joined. And then again, 24 hours in Fort Jackson, boom, first racial slur. Then boom, 72 hours, first, sexual innuendo. And then I was like, is this what the military is cracked up to be? It got a little bit better. And in AIT, I had a few here and there's, but nothing that was, detrimental to me. But then when I got to Germany, that's when I started seeing the true colors of what, harassment and assault looks like, because, it started with harassment, and then it turned into my actual assault. And then it turned into my being let go from active and moved into a reserve service, because they said I was unfit to serve. They basically drove me out because, the constant making me feel like I was the one that was going crazy, when actually they just didn't want me there, because they was protecting this person who had so much rank over me and so much over, 17 years to a 2-year soldier. Of course, they're going to get rid of me. And that's what they actually did. And, but then, going into a reserve unit that was, actually a joke, because they knew what my situation was. Sometimes they would say to me, at the time as a PFC, if you don't want to show up to duty, for your duty call this month, we'll just tell you were there, that type of feeling. And I was like, why the fuck did I do this for? But, I did my time. On 98, I was like, I'm done. And then from 98 to 2004, if you knew me personally, you knew that I served. But if you did not know me and you just met me, I would not identify as a veteran. I was like completely just done with the military. But also, I didn't get any VA the way my discharge took place. No VA, no benefits, no GI Bill. They took everything away from me. And I was basically back to square one, and really trying to navigate this, hidden injury that I wasn't telling anybody that actually happened to me. Because when I came home, the first thing my mother told me was like, don't tell anybody you were assaulted in the military, because you basically tarnished your service. So it turned into like, okay, I'm not going to tell anybody. But I was mentally and physically abusing myself. I was not taking care of myself properly. I became incredibly overweight. I was not healthy. I was popping pills left and right because I was trying to control my anxiety, my depression. And I was basically killing myself slowly. It killed my first marriage because I was a total, total mentally fucked up. But then I started realizing in 2014, I had a really bad anxiety attack that actually hospitalized me. And if it wasn't for my current husband telling the physician's assistant, like, my wife served, she came back in because they thought I was having a heart attack. They didn't know what I was experiencing. And my husband's like, my wife served. The PA came in and she goes to me, did something happen to you in the military? And that was one of the first times I openly discussed my assault. And the course of action took completely different. They diagnosed me with PTSD. And then I started like this whole PTSD remedy. Again, the remedy of PTSD, bunch of meds, and again, just killing myself with more and more meds. But at least I knew that I identified with PTSD.
Right.
And then in 2016, I took this route of, again, I was at my heaviest. I was about close to 300 pounds. I was 298. And I was really unhappy. I couldn't even go up a flight of stairs. I was dealing with, again, anxiety, depression. But then on top of it, because of these meds, hypertension, and they told me I was about to become diabetic. And that totally scared the crap out of me. My grandmother was insulin dependent, did not want to become my grandmother. So I said, you know what, I'm going to find an alternate way. So I started practicing holistically. I went into like this cocktail of healthy healing where, I started to run, I started doing yoga, I started meditating, I started journaling, but I also started to find organizations that felt that I knew I could relate to other people. And that's why the Pink Berets is so important to me. I joined the Pink Berets in the height of the Vanessa Guillen. I met Stephanie Gatas. She was part of the grassroots effort as well. And, this well-being mindset has really helped me to basically navigate my day. I have not taken a med in 5 years, and I feel the best. I mean, I'm 50 and I feel the best I felt in a really long time. But when it comes to the whole Vanessa Guillen action, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in because, July 1st, they found her body. And then July 2nd, we started this petition to open the investigation of Fort Hood. July 21st, we had 5,000 signatures. We took them to the Congress Triangle and we had a press conference and we requested for the investigation of Fort Hood to open. And then July 29th, I was back in the Hill and I was testifying alongside Melissa Bryant, and we testified in front of the military personnel committee on what happened to Vanessa Guillen. And then from there on, then you started they went the military personnel committee went to Fort Hood. They did their own investigation. We had the IRC. We had a multitude of things, and now the actual bill and changing it to the way the chain of command, reporting outside of the chain of command. So a lot was executed in 2 years, but mentally it's draining because, as an advocate, you're always on the go. You never know what's going to happen, who's going to pick up the phone. Lucy, could you testify for the IRC? Lucy, could you talk to this one? And I'm grateful that I have this type of support mechanism. My family has been incredibly supportive, but I had to really do a lot of, self-care as well in between. And sometimes I would lay low and tell people like, look, I just can't discuss the case anymore. I was always in full throttle, and there was weeks on top of weeks that, maybe I slept like 2 or 3 hours because we were just constantly on the go with this issue.
It's unreal. All right, lots to unpack there. And you kind of got it started by telling me how you got in the military. So you took some work off me here, which is great. But I do want to go back a little bit and sort of unpack some of that stuff, because I think it's super important to hear a little bit more about your story. So your brother recruited you. Did you know what you wanted to do in the military, or you were just going in as a way for your family or whatever?
My dad, I am from a Puerto Rican, Cuban, New Jersey family. My dad died in 1989 of AIDS. and my dad was an addict, and he died of AIDS. And AIDS in 1989 was, the plague. So
it was the COVID before COVID.
It was a COVID before COVID, and it really hurt my family financially. So my mom was like, I can't pay for two daughters in college. My sister was a rising junior. I was just starting. I said, hey, I'll find a way. Both my brothers were serving. One brother is Marine. My other brother was in the Army. I asked them both, hey, you know me, I'm your sister. Which one would work? And I ended up going to the Army because it was a shorter boot camp. That was basically why.
Neither one of them said Air Force, huh?
Nobody said Air Force. Nobody said Air Force. And I wish,
Sorry,
I honestly
Force.
think, I wish, because I did my first MOS training with the Air Force, and I saw their luxury barracks and how well they were kept. And I was in World War II barracks in Fort Devens. But my brothers told me, so I was pretty Private Benjamin. I will be very honest. I went in there like, oh my God, you want me to go under that? That type of mentality. But I went through it. I went to Fort Jackson. I got out of a basic.
What was the toughest part of boot camp for you?
For me, absolutely everything. Because I'm one of those. I was always very athletic. Let's just say that I was never. It wasn't about the athletic component of it, because that I had, like my PT test, I would always, I would rock that. But it was everything else. I could be a space cadet at times, and it was times I just didn't like the the physicality of getting like, like, oh my God, I only can wear green and those type of things. And again, I'm Jersey, so it would come out of me in that way. But I learned a lot about the way, my unit was we had so many people from all walks of life. My battle buddy was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And me and her were just constantly getting in trouble because we were always like getting the laugh, and we always got into some sort of trouble, but we did it. And it was a very interesting, but for me, I think the hardest part, I loved my M16 training, and I loved all that stuff. I actually shoot archery now, and it comes into play, but I love that side of it. For me, it was more about like, reading a map and those type of things, because I'm just like, that stuff is just wild for me. But it was just a really different way of life, because remember, I grew up in the 80s, so I went from being a New York City club kid to going to Fort Jackson.
I understand.
Fatigues. Yeah.
When they sent me to Fort Hood, I stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
Like this New York kid, this Long Island kid sitting there, hey, oh, whoa, wait, it's hey, y'all, it was a
like I'm pulling into Fort Jackson with a Depeche Mode t-shirt on, you know what I mean? And it's looking at me like, what the frick is this? So that was me. But again, I really started navigating. My first MOS, I was a 98 Hotel, which is a Morse code interceptor. I'm probably the worst Morse code interceptor ever produced by the Army, but okay. I was a Morse code interceptor. And then, the MOS got abolished. And then I became a 75 Bravo. I went to the admin sector. They loved me because I already had my top secret clearances because of being in military intelligence school, but I could type super fast because when you're a Morse code interceptor, you really gotta, plug away. So as a 75 Bravo, I was put in I was attached to a finance unit in Germany because of the way I had all these clearances that I had garnered when I was in MI school.
To go to Germany, or that's just where you ended up?
No. So what happened was my original orders were supposed to be in Okinawa, but then Desert Storm started and they pulled my orders and I got sent to Germany. So I got sent to Frankfurt, Germany, and I was attached to a finance unit in Hanau. And then I would deploy through Fifth Corps. I would do TDY efforts to help my, go pick up pay problems, bring them back and resolve issues that were taking place with the soldiers that were deployed. So I did that 3 times, and then after my third one, they left me on the ground because we were just doing a lot of different. We started doing more legal work, so I was processing, different discharges and things to that nature.
Were you upset that like you went as a military intelligence individual and this war kicks off, and then all of a sudden you're stuck doing pay and paperwork and everything else? Like, did you want to? No, not at all.
No, I was okay with it because I still found it incredibly interesting. I loved being in Germany. At first, I wasn't too fond of Germany, but I really started exploring the country itself. On the weekends, I would just go all over the place. I was that one person, me and my roommate. When you first get to Germany, you have like this welcome to Germany type of class. And the woman that was teaching it from the USO, she's like, okay, this weekend, make sure you stay on post because none of you speak German. So we don't want you to get lost and all this good stuff. My roommate who spoke fluent German, she was like, hey, I heard the Pet Shop Boys are going to be in Stuttgart. Do you want to take a train and go to Stuttgart? So I was like, sure, why not? I'm going to take it. You know how to speak German. You can get us there. So we ventured to Stuttgart from Hanau. And then, on Monday, she was like, okay, so what did everybody do? And, Joe Blow here is saying I went to the PX, and another one person I went to the bar. And we're like, well, we went to Stuttgart as job boys. And everyone's like, what the hell's these two going on? But I loved Germany. I loved everything about Germany, but then, I was attached again. I was the only person of my MOS in my unit. So they kind of wanted to start having someone mentor me and to learn more about the actual MOS. So that's when they partnered me with this person that was stationed in Frankfurt. And then he became my mentor. At first, it was pretty cool. But then I started realizing like the true colors of him. And the first time I realized that he had more intention about me was when he tape measured me. After my PT test, I never made weight. So, they used to, we didn't have that sophisticated little thing you hold on to. They used to tape measure you. And one of the first tape measure he did just made me feel absolutely disgusting. He took the tape measure around my breast and just I felt completely violated. And then, he had to move around my hips and he was like, let me do your breast again. And I was like, dude, you have the measurements, like, can't you move on? And I remember telling my first sergeant, I'm like, I never have him tape measure me again because he really made me feel so disgustingly uncomfortable. And then, I could just see it was just changing the relationship, me and him. And then,
did you try to get away from him?
I tried. A multitude of times. I'm like, could you find someone else that I could report to? I just didn't want him to be in my work environment. And then ultimately, he said that I failed my PT test, and which I didn't. So it didn't I didn't get promoted, because your PT test had a lot with your promotion. And he called and he's like, Private PFC Chinea, we should go out to dinner. I want to discuss, what happened and all that good stuff. So I tried to get multiple people in my unit to go with me, but nobody wanted to go with me. So I said, ultimately, what can he do to me? So we went out to dinner and then he brought me back to the barracks and I went to my room and I'm like, why are you getting out of your car? And he was like, oh, I'm going to do like a barracks check, safety check on everybody. So I was like, fine. I never thought anything of it. And then next thing I know, he is knocking on my door and then that it happened. And it was just probably one of the, if not the worst. I can't even recall the time because it just felt like a forever type of moment. And then 72 hours later, I wouldn't get out of bed. And my first sergeant came storming into my barracks and she's like, what the fuck is going on? Why haven't you reported to the unit? And I told her what happened. And at first she was like, okay, we're going to get this fucker and blah, 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 blah. And she goes, who did it? And when I told her who did it, it changed. And she's like, are you sure that's what happened? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure what happened. And then, she goes, fucking get dressed, get to the unit. And I went to the unit, and then it just became a cycle. And nobody, I was never treated the same by the command that I worked for so closely. And then I was like, hey, when are we going to start the paperwork? When are we going to start the reporting? Don't worry about it. We're taking care of it. No worry. We're going to take care of it. And they never reported it. And next thing I know, I was being transferred from Germany to Fort Taunton, Queens. And that was it.
So were you more, I mean, when you're first starting as a female, and you tell her this, because obviously it's easier to tell a female in that scenario than a male, I would assume. I don't want to, I'm just assuming that you would feel more comfortable. That said, did you feel more let down because your first sergeant let you down, or because another female let you down? Like, was there a difference to you in your mind?
In my mind, I was more hurt that my first sergeant did not believe me, because I worked so closely with them. I was the unit clerk. I was with them all the time. And it was devastating, because I was the lowest ranking person in that office, but they treated me like I was one of them. And I started noticing that they were just clearly just changing the dynamic. I would get in, I was like, hey, why don't I have privileges to this? No, we're going to give it to someone else. And it just slowly started to deteriorate. And
did you ever go back and talk to her again, like one-on-one, and say, what the hell?
I mean, I tried to, and she did not want to hear it. I mean, it went from where I could go into her office and fool around and be like, she was like a mother figure to me, to, I'm just, a private shithead, and she didn't give a fuck about it anymore. And it happened with multiple people in my chain of command. And then ultimately, when they said to me, they made me feel like I was going crazy. And when they saw me falling apart, that's when they started taking advantage of the fact that, they were really trying to tell me that what happened did not happen to me. And, I'll never forget it, because they really do a number on you. And it's like it's a mental mind fuck, because they just want you to think that you are actually going crazy. And I would say to them, hey, why weren't you here? Well, I knew that person was going to be there, and I don't want to be around them. Well, that means you're being belligerent. And I'm like, how am I being belligerent? I just don't want to be around the person. I just experienced this with the person, and you're belligerent, and you're this and you're that. And I'm like, I'm just trying to survive. And that's the type of culture that is cultivated. And sometimes I think, even when the chain of command has a woman's presence, sometimes I felt like it was worse. That, I think I might have been in a better situation. It was all male, but it really screwed with me for a really long time. And
I get that, and I understand, because I've talked to a lot of females in the military who have echoed the sentiment that sometimes females are other females' biggest barriers and detractors, right? Like, there's older females who look at you and say, you didn't go through what I went through. You have it easier. So therefore, I'm going to be harder on you, because I've already been through this, and you need to know how to go through it the way I did, which is, again, it's that sort of hazing's not the right word, but it's just kind of like the older sibling versus the younger sibling. You have to go through it the exact same way I did, even though these are completely different circumstances.
It's that suck it up, buttercup type of mentality. And I'm like, nah, I don't want to suck it up. Like, but then, I came home, and it was even worse, because I grew up in a household where affection was not something that was present. It was kind of, to tell my family, again, I did not openly discuss my assault with members of my family till way years later. The only person I told was my mother, and she's like, well, what did you do for you to get assaulted? And don't tell anybody, because you basically failed by that happening to you in the military. And I'm like, okay, then I'm totally screwed, at that point. But that's what's so heart-wrenching, is you hear other women that have these cultural issues as well. You have these issues as well.
Just out of curiosity, do you know what happened to your assailant? Like what happened to the rest of their career?
Absolutely nothing about him.
Wow. Yeah, sometimes it's weird. I have heard people tell me, "Oh, that person went on to go be a sergeant major. That person went on to go be a full colonel or a general or whatever," and that becomes even more disconcerting, to say the least. Okay.
Oh, you hear it all the time, where you have cases, and trust me, in the advocacy space, we've seen these cases, and where hey, he retired with all his glitz and glory, or they retired and they got their full retirement and all that good stuff, and it's like, it's heart-wrenching, because you have to sit back and kind of take it in and say, like, this is what they do to you, and it's just horrible. So.
Now you mentioned they had pushed you to the reserves, and after 8 years, you end up getting, when you were getting out, you were done. Was there a part of you that wanted to stay? Was there a part of you that wanted to try to write it while you were still in, or you had just kind of raised the white flag at that point and were like,
I raised the white flag really, early on. I was just like, I just want to, fulfill this commitment that I've signed for, and I'm done. And that's what I wanted to do. When I first went in, my aspiration was to try to make it as a career, because both my brothers were, on their way to being, 20-year plus career, military members. And I wanted to follow that path. But clearly it did not go that way. And
you never told them?
No, I never told them. And actually, one of them I don't talk to any longer, because he didn't want me to testify. It became a very huge battle in my family.
Oh, wow.
Because he felt like I was disparaging his core. So you could just imagine that. And then my brother, who was actually my recruiter, went through a phase of, like, he felt it was his fault because he actually recruited me into the military.
Sure. Yeah.
So it was, it's that type of yin and yang type of mentality in my family. But, it's mind-boggling that, again, culturally, we have to navigate this system, because families and civilians don't know the inner workings of the military. They don't know how the UCMJ works. They don't know how different prosecution, they think law is law, and whatever happens in the outside happens in the military. They don't know the intricacies and those differences. And that's something that I always try to tell anybody, is like, it's a different way of life. The laws are different. The UCMJ is completely different. I just couldn't go and report it. I had to go through a chain of command structure and all that good stuff. And that's why it became personal work to me. And that's why, again, organizations like the Pink Berets, if I'm talking to someone next to me, they know what I went through. They know how I feel, because I couldn't tell anybody, because nobody could relate to what I experienced.
Right.
And that's why organizations like, the Pink Berets and other organizations that do this type of work are so important and are so valuable, because you create these support systems that are so important to have. Again, when you're in a room of assault, of survivors, you know how you feel. You can. It's a different dynamic. And when we have these catalyst retreats, you feel like you're part of a different world, but you have this support that's wrapped around you, because the person next to you knows how you feel and knows what you went through, and you could share your stories and you could make someone feel. I wouldn't go into this advocacy work if I wasn't connected to it the way I am.
Sure. If
I
it's
don't,
personal,
I
kids,
don't, right. And I don't want another human being to experience what I experienced because, I experienced, being partially homeless, and the transition for me was really, really difficult
right.
because again, I expected my career to go differently and it didn't. And that's a mind fuck on its own. And my path did not go the way I wanted to. So I really sit here and say you're not alone because there's a lot of people out there that are still experiencing what I experienced, and it gets better. And you just have to work in a way that you just have to create this really valuable support system around you. And again, that's why I do the work that I do. And that's why I feel so passionate about,
Mhm.
the advocacy space that we, the grassroots movement, because if I didn't have that grassroots movement around me, I don't know if I would have gone as far as, doing that testimony. Because let me tell you, before I got in that chair and turned on my mic and had my 5 minutes, I mean, I can't tell you what I was feeling, because that was the first time I actually said, hey, I'm Lucy and I am a military sexual assault survivor. And that was huge, and it took me 27, at that point, it was 27 years ago. And now it's 29. I was 27 years to say that in that space.
Well, it doesn't matter how long it takes you. The courage is still admirable, to say the least. I wanted to ask you about your transition because you're getting out, and I get the sense you wanted to run as far away from the military as possible. Did you have any idea what you wanted to do?
Um, I mean, I've always, I I went into an admin role because that's what I traditionally learned. So I was really great with computers because at the time that I was just about to depart the military, we started using email systems and things to that nature. So I was able to use those skills, transfer those skills into my everyday life. Now I work, I'm not just an advocate. That's not my 9 to 5 job. I actually have a 9 to 5 job in corporate, in the corporate space in DNI and diversity inclusion. So I work in the DNI space right now. So I've been able to, I was able to use a lot of the skills, my skill set, and transfer it into a different way of life now. So I do work in the corporate space now.
I wanted to ask you, you get out in 98. When 9/11 happens, obviously you're somebody who's in the shadow of New York, as was I growing up. Was there any part of you that wanted to get back in and go?
Absolutely. And what prevented me was that I had kids. But if I was single, I would have been right there. I would have gone right back in and done it,
Despite
because
everything that happened to you, knowing it could
despite
happen.
everything that happened to me, because again, I was sitting in New Jersey when it happened, and I'll never forget it. I was in Union City. I worked for the Union City Board of Ed. I was in a meeting in Roosevelt School in 48th Street, which is, if you know Union City, it's right there in the Palisades. You have one of the most fantastic views of New
New
York.
York City. Yep.
And I was about to have a meeting with the principal at the time and multiple people from the Board of Ed. And the principal walks in. He goes, "We're going to have to cancel the meeting, ladies and gentlemen. My wife just called and a plane hit the World Trade Center." And we're like, "What?" So we went to the roof of the school and we actually just saw this cloud of smoke. And my thing was, okay, I have two of my kids. I had three kids at this point. Two of my kids were in a school in Weehawken, and my little guy was at daycare. So I called my ex-husband. I'm like, "You pick one, I'll pick up two." But when I got to two, the school, since I work for the Board of Ed, parents were coming in droves to pick up their kids because the school sat on the top it's on the cliffs of Weehawken, and it was right on top of where the Lincoln Tunnel makes the turn.
Yep.
And there was talks about this white van that they couldn't find, and it was going to go through one of the tunnels. So kids were being picked up left and right. So I went into their classroom and I said, "Hey," I go, "Mommy's in the office. I'm here. Hang tight. I'm going to help the office, release kids from school. And I did that, and then I took them home, and it was just, you could see this cloud of smoke. It was just intense. But what we had one young man who they never found him. He passed away on our block. But one of the things that happened was they opened one of the schools as like, because some of the kids weren't being picked up because their parents were still in the city. And we watch kids kids being picked up at like 6, 7. And then there was one child that, it was 12 o'clock. We still didn't know where their parent was. We're like hoping like, oh, we hope this kid isn't, his parent isn't a result of the trade center. And when that woman walked in to pick up that child, the whole place went crazy, because that child thought that he was ultimately going to be left there. And so those are the feelings. And I still go very often to the 9/11 memorial. I used to be part of Team Red, White, and Blue, and we do the Yellow Roses on Veterans Day, and we do those type of service projects to honor those that lost their lives. I also run for Team TAPS, so I've done 2 Marine Corps marathons for Team TAPS.
Wow.
I just did the New York City Marathon with my son Julian, and the Guillen family, and I'll show you because I have it next to me. The Guillen family gave me I don't know if you know that Vanessa was an avid runner, and the Guillen family gave me the honor of wearing her picture. So I wore this on my back, and I carried Vanessa with me for 26 miles in honor of TAPS and of Vanessa. So right now, a lot of my races, I wear Vanessa's picture. I call Myra, her sister, I send her a text and say, hey, I have this race coming up. Is it okay if I carry Vanessa with me? I just did the United half in New York City, it goes from Brooklyn to Central Park. And I sent Mama Guillen my medal. So she had it in my honor and for Vanessa. So, I do that type of thing. And the weight of honoring Vanessa and honoring those who, lost their lives tragically to either suicide or to military sexual trauma, because we have lost a lot of lives also, because women and men who've experienced MST have taken their own lives because they just can't connect anymore.
All right. We've gone over so much. I am curious, you're doing a civilian thing, you're working along, and all of a sudden, you'd mentioned before that a friend of yours told you, when I see our picture, I think of you. You hear that and it sort of jars you awake, if you will, on where you are. What are you thinking and feeling, and how do you begin the steps of this? Because you don't end up on Capitol Hill by accident, right? Like that doesn't happen. Nobody stumbles into Capitol Hill testimony. You're either doing something that the feds are looking for you doing wrong, or you're advocating for something like you are. So there's a good reason why I've never testified on Capitol Hill, because, they don't want to hear a damn thing I have to say. Trust me. That said, what are the sort of first steps in the infancy of this for you?
So again, so I started, my friend calls me, I do all the research that I can. And then my first action was I posted on social media the picture, there was the hashtag I am Vanessa Guillen. And I found a picture of, kind of like a shadow of Vanessa with the I am Vanessa Guillen, and I posted it. I was doing advocacy work, very minute advocacy work, let's just say, in New Jersey. I was advocating for VA benefit rights for women transition housing, because in New Jersey it's non-existent. And that's the type of advocacy work that I was doing. A friend of mine that is an advocate in New York gave me a call, and she said, hey, Lucy, a group of us are going to do a kind of like a buddy check on each other after they found her body. And, could you jump on this call? We really think you would, be a good part of this call. And I joined the Zoom call, and I was in awe, because I saw a sea of advocates that I've only seen in articles and in different organizations. And I'm like, I should not be in this Zoom call. But we got to work, and right in that call, we made the decision that we were going to write the petition to ask for the congressional investigation of Fort Hood. So we worked on this really crazy media post that we started deploying on July 3rd. We finished the action on the 6th. Between
and this
the 3rd
is July
and
3rd,
2020. 2020. It's 2020. So July 6th, we already had over 5,000 signatures from, veterans, from actual active service members, men, women, and we had enough signatures. And then we, contacted the Hill. We went and we presented our petition in the Triangle, and we had a press conference. The press conference was myself, Lindsay Church from the Minority Veterans of America, and Melissa Bryant. And we presented Mikey Sherrill, Congresswoman Sherrill, this petition. By the time, and then after that Triangle request that we did the press conference, a group of us went to the gates of the White House, and we did a protest of different stories, and we hung posters of Vanessa and sunflowers because it was her favorite flower, and we shared each other's stories. By the time I went back to the hotel where I was staying in DC and got my bag and sat on the train, I got a phone call from Congresswoman Spears' office, and she said, "Hey, would you be able to testify?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll testify." And next thing you know, I thought it was going to be a Zoom testimony, and they're like, "No, you need to come back to DC." And here I am. I'm like, I've never written a testimony before. Thank God for Lindsay Church and team. They got together and we wrote we wrote the testimony. And but Lindsay, if you look at the pictures of me, or if you look on C-SPAN, Lindsay sat behind Melissa and I, and they served as our if we had to, we didn't have to answer for a question. Lindsay went on their phone, and they got the right answer, because we were questioned in a matter that, not that we weren't prepared, but it became very defensive. So if you go on C-SPAN, it became a battle with some of the congressional representation and the military personnel's committee, but it was definitely an experience that I will never forget, because I never thought that I would be the one sharing my story on behalf of a soldier,
right,
like Vanessa, and for so many others, because again, there's been so many other stories that have gone swept under the rug that people don't realize that Vanessa's not the first. No. Vanessa's not going to be the last. We again have to fight very strongly for them. But one of the things Lindsay told me, they called me because I was a nervous wreck the night before. I was about to get on the train to come to DC, and they were like, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I am so nervous. Like, why am I, doing this?" And they're like, "Lucy, you need to organize your butterflies, because if you don't organize them, you are not going to do your justice. And we know you could do this. That's why that's why Congresswoman Spears pointed at you." So it was a lot of, preparing myself. I ended up getting the butterfly tattooed on my arm, because I think about that moment all the time. But there's a picture of Congresswoman Sherrill standing with me in the corner, and she was like, had me kind of by the shoulders, and she's like, "Your jersey, like, you're gonna represent us, and you're going to do the job, and they want to hear your story, and that's why you're here." So it was interesting. But
were you surprised at the pushback you got during the questioning?
Oh, totally. But really,
I'm hearing you tell the story, and my reaction would be like, Are you guys serious? Like, you don't believe what we're saying? Like, do you think we're here?
It was only it was only one person. I can't think of his name. He's the co-chair of the military personnel's committee, and he's like, it was my army, and we started this whole back and forth. And then I was like, I can't believe this man is doing this. But what really set me in the trajectory that I took for the hearing, or the way I conveyed my testimony, was they had CID and the Sharp from the DOD testify before us. And the things they were saying, I was just burning up. I was like, seriously, you're really telling us, you know, this shit story that you're trying to convey? And, you know, they would ask the question, well, I don't have that information right now, and I don't have that information right now. I'm like, dude, you're the Sharp. You're supposed to have this information. So we were already amped, and when we got there, we got on our chairs and turned on our microphones. We went to town, you know.
And for the civilians listening, SHARP stands for Sexual Harassment and Assault Response Prevention.
Program.
Yeah, program.
Yeah,
it's a military act for.
I apologize for that. I was,
no, it's okay. I just want to make sure, in case there were some civilians who in the audience who don't get all the military acronyms. My job to translate. Yeah, and again, go ahead.
But then, you know, what people. So before I left to DC, ABC News followed me around, and that made me super like uncomfortable as well, because I was like, ABC News is following me around. But it was really a different way of looking at things, because afterwards I got into my Uber and I was like, what did I just do? It's like I totally couldn't recall what had just happened. And then I saw it on the news and I was like, oh my God, that was actually me.
That actually happened.
Yeah. And I still can't watch it.
Oh, really? Well, now I got to go back and watch the whole thing. You got me curious. I want to see it from start to finish. You know, anecdotally, and I'll say this, and this may, sort of make you feel good. So I was called up to active duty on COVID response in late 2020 into 2021. And one of my female subordinates, who was conscientious, young lieutenant, conscientious, smart, bright, has a great career ahead of her. And she was working in my operations staff, and I was running the entire task force of over 1,000 soldiers. And she was, there from the beginning. And so I left her in the job, even though she's probably 2 ranks below what it should have been, but she was hard charging and outstanding and everything else. And I remember it was a Friday. I don't know if it was a long weekend or not. I think we might've had a training holiday on Monday, whatever it was. Anyway, at any rate, something had happened. They were looking for some information. They called me, and subsequently I text her, and, I know she got an iPhone. It didn't say delivered. And then I called and it went straight to voicemail. And then I called again and it went straight to voicemail. And I'm like, this is weird. She never doesn't respond. She's always right there when I need her, or at least in a semi-timely manner. And after 2 or 3 hours, I started to get nervous. And in the back of my mind, I have this whole story about Vanessa Guillen. And I started calling around to the rest of the people. I said, have you heard from Lieutenant Miller? Have you heard can you text her and try to call her? And then literally when 2 or 3 hours went by, I made the decision, I have to call her parents. I have to call her parents. I'm worried enough that I called my boss first, and he was a 1-star general. And I explained to him the situation. I said, sorry, I got to call her parents. I don't feel comfortable. If something has happened and we wait, I'd rather scare her parents and have it be okay than not inform them and it not be okay. It was that sort of moment where I was weighing back and forth. If I call her parents and get them in, I don't want to, as a parent, I don't want that phone call ever. But when I called and I spoke to her father and I explained to her, and I asked her, I said, have you heard from your daughter? No, I haven't. Okay. Do you know when was the last time you talked to her? I haven't heard from her. It's not like her. She's been, and it's the first time I've ever spoken to the man. But in the back of my mind, this whole case is sitting there saying, if I don't make these phone calls, ultimately I'm responsible for what's going on. I can't just assume she's going to be okay. I've got to start wheels in motion if something went wrong. Long story short, she was hiking. She left her phone in a bad cell area, and she was fine. She called me back like 3 hours later. I'm fine. Thank you for being. And she was genuinely thankful for the concern. And it was a relief if nothing happened. But it's one of those things where it's just like, without the advocacy that you guys put out there, that whole transaction might not have taken place.
Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful that you did that, and thank you for sharing that story with me, because again, there's not too many that are like you in the space that are going to be that genuinely concerned for their own. There's so many stories that have gone unheard. One of the stories that we worked on, it was taking place while Vanessa case was taking place, was Camarina Gonzalez. She was stationed in Fort Riley. She was assaulted. Again, completely mistreated her case. They basically had two members of her unit. One would basically follow her and, kind of stalk her. The other basically turned the whole unit against her. She wanted to stay in the military, but they forced her out on a medical retirement. So she was medically retired from the military. And then eventually 30 days later, we're trying to get her, services. She could not get the services that, she required to help her with her military sexual trauma. And then she eventually took her own life. And as an advocate, that crushes you, because we tried our best and we did a lot of work with her, but the surroundings, the Department of Defense, the VA, the structure in place failed her. She couldn't get appointments, she couldn't get medication filled at the right time. It was just a cluster. And when we heard that she ultimately took her own life, those things are devastating, because you basically feel like you failed them. And the system failed them. The army failed her. Again, there's too many like her that nobody goes, those stories go untold. And we're working with her family to get the justice that, she deserves, because the way she was treated was not the way she should have been treated.
How do you personally reconcile the bad that happened to you for the good that's come out of it to others? I mean, if you told me I would give it all back to not have to deal with what I dealt with, I would understand. And I don't think you'd be selfish for that. I don't think you'd be wrong for that, because that is your personal, trauma that you have to live with for the rest of your life. But in turn, it has spurred on immense action to the benefit of many others. So how do you reconcile your bad into so much other good?
For me, I tell people I grieve. I grieve the loss of the person I used to be before I was assaulted. And I miss her, because I was a really different person before I was assaulted. But again, like I said before, I don't want anybody to experience what I experience. So that's how I reconcile it, because I know that, potentially someone could hear this podcast and watch this podcast and say, okay, I know where I could go. I know that there's resources out there. I know that there's people I could talk to, because I had none of that. I didn't have a resource. I didn't have anybody to talk to. And I just, again, kept on. I'm grateful that I'm still alive. Let's just say that, because there was points in my life that I didn't think I was going to be alive anymore. And again, my children kept me alive, because they are the most important thing in my world, and they kept me alive. But to reconcile it, would I want to, start my life over again and do the military again? Probably. I probably would do it again. But again, right now, the work I do is tough. It's not easy work. And sometimes I question myself. I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this, thought process over and over again? But again, if I could save one life, or I could help one person, or I could guide them in the right direction and tell them, hey, you're not alone. You can get the right services. Hey, you're here. Let's work together, and you could, you'll be fine. You're never going to be perfect, because trust me, there's nothing in me that's perfect when it comes to the way I think and the way my PTSD gets triggered at times. But I'm going to continue to do the work that I'm doing until, everything is, I don't want to say perfect in the military, but I want to say that women and men are more protected when it comes from sexual harassment and sexual assault.
Usually I ask, what would you now say to younger you about X, Y, and Z? But I think it's more appropriate, given what you just said, to go the other way around. What would pre-sexual assault Lucy, if she ran into Lucy now in the street and they had a conversation, what would she say about what you're doing?
I would hope I would tell myself that I'm proud of her. That's something I haven't heard from members of my family, from my children, yes, and my husband, and the friends that I consider family. But from members of my family, like my brothers have never said they're proud of me for doing this type of work. And I would hope that I would, stand beside myself and say, I'm really proud of you, because you are giving a voice to many that still are voiceless. So that's what I would say.
I'm proud of you. You deserve to hear it. You deserve to. You absolutely do.
Thank you.
It is, it is the work that is necessary, and it needs to be addressed by the right people who tell this experience. And the other thing that keeps going through my mind is, I hear what you do. The Larry Nassar thing at Michigan State with all the U.S. gymnasts. I mean, 2 decades of it went on, and then they finally all came together. And it's
just think of it. Just think of this. So I was assaulted in 92. One of my mentors was testifying because of the tailhook scandal. Okay. So here I am, 2020, testifying because a soldier is murdered. So it's been going on for so long, and in such pervasive ways, and nobody has stopped it. Nobody has said enough is enough. And this toxic trait that happens, and we could talk about it for hours, because there's still issues in the military service academies that everybody kind of sweeps under the rug, and those are starting to come out to light more and more out there. But it just needs to stop. The culture has to change when it comes that sexual assault and sexual harassment should not be a workplace hazard.
Yeah.
It just shouldn't.
I have this speech so many times in front of, people when I'm in command. I don't say it as much when I'm not in command, because I don't have the legal authority as I am in command, but I make it very, very clear with some choice words that within the limits of my power, I will end you. And I say it very succinctly like that if it comes across my desk. But also the other thing that I find a couple of the most senior and the strongest personality females I can, and I let them know in a one-on-one setting, if you hear anything, you can come to me. It's okay for you to walk through that door and address it with me directly, because I believe they need to know that life preserver, that lifeline is there. And I think that's a lot of the times why things don't get reported, is because they don't feel like they can have that. But if you verbally tell them that, you're giving them the green light to say, no matter what, you can walk through this door and I'll listen to what you have to say. And
you're creating a culture of a safe space. That safe space is so important. Not just for women, for men, for LGBTQ community. It has to be created. And again, this is where the trait of an empathetic leader is something that I always tell everybody. If you can't lead with any type of empathy and any type of vulnerability, then when something like this happens, it's just you don't know how to navigate it. And you make a difference when you tell a person, hey, if you see something, come to me, I will help you navigate it.
Yeah.
And not enough leaders say that to their
I keep it
members.
succinct. I can't fix a problem I'm not aware of. I can't help you if I don't know what's going on. All it takes is communication. That's step one. You have to have two-way communication with people. I want to ask you how the Pink Berets actually comes into the fold for you.
Yeah, so the Pink,
it's a cute, classy little name, right? Because we're in berets are so military, but nonetheless, this is an organization that sort of is dedicated to this whole cause. So, do you stumble on them? Do they find you? How does it all come together?
So I met Stephanie during the grassroots. So Stephanie was a vital part of the grassroots movement during the, Vanessa Guillen. And so I met Stephanie. We did the grassroots work, and I saw what she was doing. Stephanie created the Pink Berets because of the lack of resources that she couldn't find when she was trying to navigate her own experience. So she said, hey, if I can't get it, I'm going to build it, and I'm going to create someplace, a safe space for other women to have the proper healing. What she's done with the Pink Berets is outstanding. So I became a member of the Pink Berets again on the height of Vanessa Guillen, started doing volunteer work for them. I first went into the organization as their wellness director and trying to, again, advocate for a healthy, holistic practices. So yoga and, mindfulness and, running and doing those type of things. But Stephanie has created, peer-to-peer mentorship. There's a peer support group. Again, very, everything is done very privately. But she has created a structure that is such a safe space and such a safe haven for women to go and get the support that they need. And I totally support that. That's something that is so, again, important. So last year I was able to participate in their Catalyst retreat, which is 4 days in Rising Star in Texas. And it is just one of the most incredible experiences you could have. You're out there in this beautiful atmosphere with no internet, and you're just doing really great work and, yoga classes, equine therapy, you name it, support groups, and you're there for 4 days and you're really working on yourself. And I came back, I was there as a facilitator, but I also, found it very cathartic for myself. And that's when she approached me after Catalyst. And she asked me if I wanted to take the COO role. And now we're creating more infrastructure. We have an archery program starting in a few months in Texas, being led by Army veteran Leah Coriel, who's right now the world champion Paralympic archer. She won the world championship. She participated in the Olympics. So she is starting the platform for the Pink Berets. So, more to come, but there is a lot that the Pink Berets offers that is there. And it's not just Texas, it's nationwide. A lot of the programming is done virtually. And then a lot of the, you could get flown to the camp so you could participate. So it's a really great partnership. This July, we're going to partner with the Oscar Mike Foundation, and we're going to do an Oscar Mike experience for the women. Again, we have our Cast and Blast retreat, and we have another Catalyst retreat coming up. So, if you're interested in participating in any of those, go onto the Pink Berets website, register, and, put yourself in the pot to be chosen for these really great opportunities that they offer. But, we're always looking for support and donations, because one thing that Stephanie prides herself is all the services for the women that are looking for the services are 100% at no cost. And that's very important for us, because you never know what situation a person's in. So no cost programming. And again, if you want to support the Pink Berets, go onto the website. There's multiple ways you could support if you could volunteer, or again, financial donations. But I value what the Pink Berets does, and that's why it's become so near and dear to my heart.
Thepinkberets.org is the website where you guys can go check it out. Just one or two more here I wanted to ask you, and I probably should have asked this before, but the final investigation on Fort Hood comes out and the military concludes their findings. Were you happy with the investigation and the results?
Well, the findings, it was like, I was reading the report and saying, no shit, Sherlock, we already knew this shit. You just had to put it in a piece of paper so everybody else could see it. We knew how toxic Fort Hood was. I mean, for years you saw
I was stationed there.
Yeah, as my brother was stationed there. My brother was there for a multitude of years. My nephew was actually born in Temple, Texas. So my brother was stationed there various times. And again, there's people that always knew how toxic the culture was in Fort Hood. And I mean, when I think it was either 2015, 2016, prostitution ring, those type of things, you're like, why is this installation still open? So a lot of us read it together and we were like, no shit, no shit, no shit, this page, no shit. We just kept on turning and we're like, that you had to really waste this amount of money to actually tell us that this is what was going on there. So we knew, a lot of us knew, but it was good for the public to know that this is what we're dealing with as a culture in the military. This is what possibly, and there's, honestly, there's a whole bunch of other bases that should go through the same investigation. It's just that we don't want, again, keep it under wraps because that's the way the military is. But other bases should also go under those investigation. And I'm telling you, they would be eradicated at this point. But I think the report that I was happiest with was the IRC report, the independent review that the DoD did, led by Lynn Rosenthal. That was where I saw the findings and the recommendations. But what made me feel more passionate was how the sense of urgency and how SecDef Austin executed, how he took this really, really seriously and said, you got 90 days and you're going to make these recommendations. And I had the privilege and the honor to testify in front of him twice during the IRC. And he really questioned me in a way that it wasn't like, I'm sir and you have to sir me to death. He's like, okay, Lucy, call me Lloyd and tell me your story. And it was really, really just, again, another proud moment for myself that I was able to share my story in front of SecDef and Secretary of the VA, Dennis McDonough. I was actually, myself and Stephanie, who was, from the Pink Berets, we both sit on the work group for sexual assault and sexual harassment for the VA. We were appointed by the secretary to be part of this task force to change the infrastructure in the VA as well.
I cringe at asking this question out loud because when I ask it in my brain, it seems somewhat offensive, but was testifying in front of the Secretary of Defense sort of vindication for what happened to you? Does it feel anything like that? I know it's not ever going to erase it. That's why I cringe. It's totally different, but there has to be some level of, if A, then B sort of deal, and B is a lot bigger than A.
So I'll share an interesting fact. So I just got my VA benefits this year.
Wow.
When I testified, I was still fighting for them. So I said to them, you are creating a continuum of harm. I go, the DoD screwed me and the VA is screwing me. And I'm sitting here in front of you testifying. So what does that tell you? That's basically what I said to them. You're still continually fucking me. And I'm sitting here doing this type of work. Not a lot of people would do that, because they are ultimately being screwed. So here I am, basically, right? So here I am, advocating and fighting for others where I wasn't fighting for myself. And let me tell you, when I picked up the phone to tell Secretary McDonough that I finally had my benefits. That was an interesting phone call, but I was able to see him in person. I was at the White House for a bill signing of a multitude of different VA bills, and I finally got, him saying, I'm grateful, I'm glad that you have your benefits now, because again, when I was discharged, I was led to believe that I was not entitled to benefits, and I was able to get them 29 years later.
Going back to college?
I don't know. My kids, I have a 14-year-old. I don't know.
Okay,
if
so
I
your
have
kids are
five,
going to college. It works out. Yeah, it all comes out in the wash, right?
I have a 21-year-old who's in Rutgers, and so he's in school now, and I have an 8th grader. So, their mom will go eventually.
The GI Bill work is transferable to your children. So God bless.
Yes, there you go. There you go. So they would go first. But it feels good finally. I think that was probably one of my moments where I remember getting my letter. I got the phone call first, and it was, this is the VA. We want to tell you that you got X amount rating, and they walked me through the whole process. And then I got off the phone and I just started to cry. And I called Stephanie, and I called a multitude of women, players from the grassroots. And I was like hyperventilating, and they're like, you okay? And I'm like, I feel it was the first time I had like validation. It was very validating to me that finally, after 29 years and the service that I gave this country, I finally have this that says that I have a service connection now, and I have my VA benefits.
Are you proud of your service now?
I feel a little bit better about it. I feel that I know what I did when I was in the military, and I did some really interesting things, and I'm very proud of it. I have to say, if you asked me this 10 years ago, I'd say no. But definitely today I am.
Amazing. I mean, it's I'm exhausted hearing it. I'm emotionally spent hearing it. Just because, again, 29 years. I mean, that's just, it's a career for somebody else. Like, you had a career, somebody else had a complete career where they got to E9 or 06 or whatever. And you had to go that long before you got the rest of your career again. So it's wow. Just hard to put into words. One more here. The bill that they just signed this past January, and I think Senator Kirsten Gillibrand from New York was she's always been a big spearhead of the bill in reference to getting it out of the chain of command. They pulled a lot of things back. What went up was very aggressive. What came back was very mild. You took a lot of the hot peppers out and made it more whatever. You know what I'm getting at. So was that a win or a loss? How do you characterize it? Or we still have more work to do?
We still have way more work to do, but I'm happy with what we got. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
It's a step in the right direction. It's definitely a step that I really didn't think we were going to see that quickly, because so many players have been at this for such a long time. And here came this, Vanessa. She was like the reckoning for us, in the sense that, it went full throttle. And, we watched a family work with such urgency. And that was something also that the grassroots did, is we did everything because the family wanted it done. We never did anything that the family wasn't aligned with. And that was really, really important to us. But I, again, could have been better and more aggressive. Absolutely. And we still have a lot of work to do. What I really want to see is the execution of it. That's what I'm like, okay, when are we going to really start seeing the change? It can't happen overnight, but I definitely am happy with what we got. But I would have been happy with a little bit more.
Certainly understand that. And part of me is extremely disappointed that it got to this point. Command is the ultimate responsibility of any job in America. And I get it, civilians don't really understand that, but you can be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You can be Elon Musk if you want, but none of those folks ever literally have lives in their hands that they are meant to protect that are not their own children. And that is an awesome responsibility. And the idea that you are responsible for everything that happens and everything that doesn't happen. And I've always taken that responsibility very seriously. I've always embraced all of that responsibility. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, so to speak, but I welcome that weight because, without being pompous, like I have broad shoulders, I can handle it. Like I accept this responsibility and I want it all. And I'm thankful I've never had to adjudicate as a commander anything related to sexual assault. I think that speaks well. Either I'm really lucky or I've just created a climate that it wasn't going to happen, maybe a combination of both. But I'm disappointed because my fellow leaders failed at that task of command and accepting that responsibility. And so we're here, right? We are here because of routine, consistent, persistent failures of leadership across the board, not for a couple of years, not for 5 years, not for 10 years, but for decades is how we got here. And I am okay with that result. This is what happens when you fail. We must make changes. And I think the changes are all for the better.
Yep.
Lucy, I can't tell you. I mean, I'm like, I'm smarter now than I was when we started this whole thing. And I'm certainly going to be a more cognizant leader. And I thank you for that. But moreover, again, I'll tell you, the work that you have done, you have every right to be proud of it. And you and your entire staff at the Pink Berets and everything that you guys have done. This is life-changing, military service altering, future events changing kind of stuff. And
but I also want to give props to, again, minority veterans of America and not in my Marine Corps, and protect our defenders and different organizations that were really instrumental in all this work, because it was very aggressive work and we really had to work together as a team. And did we all agree at the same time at certain things? No. But we worked really well together, and I'm grateful that I was in this space, and grateful for the people that surrounded me, and we got shit done. So I very happy for that.
The smile says it all. It really does. And if you're just listening to the podcast, go check it out on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for all your time, your candor, and certainly opening up your story to all of us and sharing it with us. I know it's never easy to relive those things, even on a surface level. It stays with you forever. So I appreciate you being willing to share it all. But again, the pinkberets.org, where you can go. Final thoughts, final words from you?
No, thank you for allowing me to be here this evening with you. And thank you for creating this platform. I truly appreciate it.
Lucy Del Gaudio, thank you for being part of the Hazard Ground.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Kill Cliff's Hazard Ground podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at producer@hazardground.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.